With the release of Terminator Dark Fate at the end of this weekend, I was going to review all the Terminator movies leading up to the movie. But then I realized since Terminator Dark Fate is taking place after Terminator 2, I just have to review Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. But first, hey everybody, and thanks for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. Just so you know, this is going to be a spoiler-filled Terminator 2 review. I'm not going to spoil everything in the movie, but I am going to spoil Terminator 2. If you have not seen it yet, I recommend that you go watch and then come on back, and I'd love to talk about it with you. I'm also going to try my best not to reiterate or say things that people have been saying about Terminator 2 for over the decades that it's been out. Yeah, it's one of the best movie sequels ever made. It's got phenomenal action, one of the best action movies ever made, blah, 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 all that stuff. I may mention some stuff like that, but this is mostly just going to be me talking about why I like Terminator 2, why I personally really love Terminator 2. I'm going to gush about this movie, don't get me wrong, just like a lot of people have, but I'm going to try and make the gushing things that you haven't heard a billion times over. So without further ado, let's get into it and let's talk about Terminator 2, Judgment Day. So Terminator 2 was released in 1991 and stars Arnold Schwarzenegger back again as the T-800, Linda Hamilton back again as her role in Sarah Connor, introducing Edward Furlong as young John Connor, Sarah's son, and Robert Patrick as the terrifying T-1000. Arnold Schwarzenegger returns as the T-800, sent back in time to 1991 to protect a young John Connor from the terrifying T-1000, Robert Patrick, who has been sent back in time to kill the leader of the resistance when he was a kid after the failed attempts at killing Sarah Connor before he was born. So starting off with some spoilers right off the bat, I love the way that this movie is set up. This movie is set up very similar to how Terminator 1 starts, and I like the way that they do that because as we know after we watch the movie and after we've seen the movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger is actually playing the good guy in this one. The T-800, they completely flip it on its head and he's the good guy in this movie. But the way that they set this movie up is very similar to the first Terminator. Show us glimpses of the future and how horrible it is, Skynet versus the humans, and they give us a sense of the stakes of what these characters and what our protagonists are actually fighting for to prevent from happening, and they're showing us the horrors of it so that we understand why this can't happen. And then we get introduced to Arnold arriving back into the past, just like we did in the first Terminator movie. And he goes and he steals someone's clothes just like the first Terminator movie, and they start playing bad to the bone as he gets on the motorcycle. All of it setting him up to be the villain once again. We're all getting a sense of fear and intensity from Arnold because we know what he's done in the first one. Next, we get introduced to the arrival of the T-1000 played by Robert Patrick. Very similar to how we got introduced to Kyle Reese after Arnold in the first Terminator. Trying to trick our brains into being like, oh, this is going to be the Kyle Reese of this movie. This is the protagonist. This is the one that we're rooting for against Arnold. Then we get introduced to John, and then we get introduced to Sarah Connor once again. And let's just talk about Sarah Connor for a second, because this is one of the greatest transformations of a character arc in movie history, in my opinion. From the very first shot, when we first see Sarah Connor in the mental institution, doing some pull-ups, the way her attitude is towards her doctors, this is not the same Sarah Connor that we were introduced to and left off in Terminator 1. This is a Sarah Connor who has seen what the future is going to be. She understands the horrors of what it's going to be, and she is trying to get that across to everyone around her with no success. No one is listening to her. She's having nightmares about Judgment Day. She's not able to connect with any kind of humanity. She's not able to connect as a mother with her son, John Connor, who is now in the foster home. We'll talk more about that a little later. And the experience has just changed her forever and has turned her into a completely different character. In no way is she the damsel in distress in this movie. She kicks so much butt. She is so awesome. She has made her mark in pop culture, and it really is well deserved. Sarah Connor in Terminator 2 is just one of the greatest character transformations in my opinion. Going off on character transformations, let's go a little bit more on Arnold Schwarzenegger's T-800, because I love the way that this movie takes the horrifying monster who's tracking down our main characters in Terminator 1, completely flips it on its head, and just turns Terminator into the good guy. And the reveal of it is also so awesome. There's the great chase scene where both the T-1000 and the T-800 are chasing down John Connor in the mall, trying to get to him first. And I was on the edge of my seat watching this, trying to watch it as a first-time viewer with the intensity of the scene, not knowing who's going to get to John first, because watching it and the way that it was set up, very similar to Terminator 1, I'm thinking Robert Patrick's the good guy. I'm thinking this is the one that's coming to save John Connor, and the Terminator's back trying to kill him, and that's the bad guy. So I'm watching these guys go after, and I'm watching Robert Patrick's behavior in the mall, and it's getting a little bit more devious, a little bit more, wait, this guy doesn't seem that nice. He's shoving kids out of the way. He's not being that nice. And when he sees John Connor, he starts racing towards him with such intensity that does not look like he's ready to rescue him. Then he comes to the head in the hallway where the T-1000's heading towards John Connor, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is coming with the roses, pops out the gun. For a split second, you think he's going to kill John Connor, and then he goes, "Get down!" And he just blasts Robert Patrick in the chest. And from that moment on, the T-800 and the way that we think of him is completely changed from the first Terminator movie. Which leads to the heart and soul of Terminator 2 and why I think it's so great. And that's the dynamic between John Connor, Edward Furlong, and the T-800 by Arnold Schwarzenegger. I love the relationship between John and the T-800 in this movie. I also love that they made John a kid. I love the age that they made John at, because kids see the world in such an innocent and simplistic way. And so to have this T-800 paired up with John Connor, this kid, and John's teaching the T-800 moral lessons about humanity and what it means to be human, what you can and can't do, and Arnold, the T-800, is learning things about humanity through the innocence of this kid, not only leads to some really funny moments.
Just put up your hand and say, I swear I won't kill anyone.
I swear I will not kill anyone. He'll live.
But it actually gives some heart to the movie. It gives a lot of heart to these characters and to this story, because a lot of themes in this movie are about humanity and what does it mean to be human. And we learn a lot of that through John's teaching to the T-800 and how he starts to change his, I was gonna say mind, but I guess it'd be more like his programming. how he starts to change his programming of how he's seeing humanity, how he's seeing the world, and how he observes and tries to take on traits of human behavior. A lot of this movie, and why I love this movie, is because of the characters and the character interactions. Like when John and the T-800 go to save Sarah Connor from the mental institution, from the T-1000, and Sarah sees the Terminator for the first time after so many years and is frightened by it. To have him save her from the T-1000 and use the line that Kyle Reese told her when he first met her, "Come with me if you want to live." It's so cool to see all these things from Terminator 1 getting flipped on their head to where Sarah Connor is now working alongside the T-800. It was just brilliant writing, a brilliant idea, and I just love it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the action and the effects in this movie, because yeah, they've been praised for the decades that this movie's been out now, but they still hold up pretty well. The action in this movie is a lot of fun, and it's mostly all done in a practical way. I love the chase scene on the motorcycle and the truck between the T-800 where he's trying to save John from the T-1000 who's chasing them in that truck, and how they're going through, crashing this truck through barriers, and it's like, it's actually there, it's physically there, it looks great. They actually blow this thing up, there's actual fire, there's actual explosions. Like when Sarah, John, and the T-800 are once again trying to get away from the T-1000, and he's in the helicopter, and they're in the truck, and the helicopter crashes into the truck. I mean, it looks great, it's shot well, it's practically there, it looks phenomenal. And I also love the effects done on the T-1000. There's very little CGI done in this movie with the T-1000, but when they do use the CGI, it's to the best effect that they can, it's for a purpose. And that's one of the things that I also noticed about Terminator 2 is how, yes, it becomes an action movie, it's not so much a horror movie as the first Terminator 1 was, but they still have the horror vibe, they still have the horror atmosphere with the T-1000, and the way that they're able to use his liquid regeneration powers or abilities to the horror aspect. Like when he's able to morph into John's stepmother and stabs the stepfather through the mouth. I mean, that is horrific. That is horrifying imagery. Or when he's the liquid on the floor and he builds himself back up to be the security guard and just stabs the guy through the eye. I mean, there's a lot of great horror concepts and a great horror imagery in this movie that doesn't make it feel entirely different from the feeling of Terminator 1. A lot of this movie and the premise of it is very similar to Terminator 1, as a matter of fact. The guy comes back to the future to save someone who's important to the future, and another Terminator is trying to kill him. That's exactly what's happening in Terminator 2, but what makes it so much better in many people's eyes to Terminator 1 are the themes of the movie, the character dynamics, and the character developments. And the action is, of course, phenomenal, and the storytelling is great, and it's written brilliantly, and it's flipped everything on its head to make it feel different from the first one and unique and new. And because of all these things, when we do come to the end and we do have a line like
"Hasta la vista, baby,"
which is so important and has a lot of heart and weight to it because of how that line was developed from John teaching the Terminator about humanity and how to be human and human behavior.
And if you want to shine them on, it's hasta la vista, baby.
Hasta la vista, baby. Hasta la vista, baby.
So that when we do, in the end, eventually get to T-800's sacrifice for humanity, you do feel something. You feel heart for this robot, this machine that we feared and wanted to get away from with Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese in the first one, we now are getting tearful over watching him go and melt into that incinerator lava thing. I don't know. I'm not an expert. But you feel it. You feel it because of that connection from John. You feel it because of that bond that John and the T-800 have made over the course of the movie. And I just love the ending of Terminator 2. It's one of the reasons why the sequels haven't always worked for me. I mean, Terminator 3 is okay. Terminator Salvation, I think, is decent as well. Not really Genesis. But the Terminator sequels, they always feel unnecessary to me because of this ending in Terminator 2. It is so perfect. They defeat Skynet. They stop the future from coming. And Sarah Connor is able to have, for the first time ever, hope for the future. She doesn't have to live in fear of it. And because of that, she's able to reconnect with her son, John, who for the whole movie she hasn't even been able to be a mother to. She hasn't been able to connect to on a human level, let alone as a family member. And it's a beautiful arc to see. And yeah, I said I wasn't going to spoil everything in Terminator 2, but what can I say? I love this movie. This movie has so much great stuff in it. Not just the effects, which always look phenomenal, and the action that always looks great and is a lot of fun and riveting and intense and awesome to watch. But it also has just the great characters, the great character development, the great bond, the great dynamic. It takes virtually everything from Terminator 1, flips it on its head, and looks at it in a new perspective. And that's one of the reasons why it is, in my opinion, quoted as one of the best movie sequels ever made. And to me, it is the definitive sequel and ending to the Terminator story. Terminator 3, Terminator Salvation, and Genesis, yeah, they exist. But I always watch Terminator and Terminator 2, and I always feel fulfilled. I feel like that's the end of the story. But with Terminator Dark Fate coming out, and I'm going to go see it tonight, we'll see if it's able to make it into the storyline for me. Let's see if by the end of Terminator Dark Fate I'll say, yeah, the Terminator movies are Terminator, Terminator 2, and Terminator Dark Fate. But time will tell. Anyway, guys, those are all my thoughts and opinions and my gushing about Terminator 2 Judgment Day. But what do you think about Terminator 2 Judgment Day? Do you love it as much as the world seems to love it? Or are you on the minority and you're like, wasn't that great? Comment down below, let me know. I want to hear all your thoughts and opinions about this movie. And guys, as always, thank you so much for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. And once again, my name's Zachary Milne. Thank you for talking movies with me, and hope you have yourself a great day.